Don't mistake discipline for silence. In the tactics room in San Diego, under the faint hum of fluorescent lights and 30 pairs of eyes, a slap rang out like a muted gunshot. She didn't flinch. Not a word of defense. She only adjusted her collar, turned, and walked away, and the entire base thought they'd won. But discipline doesn't walk away. It recalibrates. That night, the entrance to the close-quarters reflex arena shifted to a dim red glow. Infrared cameras blinked awake, rules snapped into place like the edge of a blade. When the loudest laughers stepped into the maze, they would learn the one lesson: Bud, S etches into bone. Control trumps volume. The next morning, judgment fell like cold metal. And with just 5 words, she closed the final door. Are you ready to hear those 5 words? And why you never touch a seal? The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed like a taut guitar string on the verge of snapping. Tactics Room 4 at the San Diego Naval Academy was as bright as ever. Neat, cold, and relentlessly punctual. 30 officers sat ramrod straight, shoulders brushing, eyes fixed on a glowing slide bearing the crisp words, Behavioral Command Control. No one spoke. No one needed to. In the military, silence is often the highest form of discipline until someone mistakes it for fear. Lieutenant Commander Mara Consincade stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind her back. Her brown hair was tied back tightly, not a strand out of place. Her voice was low and precise, like the cadence of a song drilled in boot camp. Phase 2 of stress response. You don't need to control others. You need to control yourself. No one dared breathe too loudly. Except for Captain Brick, seated 2 rows back, his arms slung over the neighboring chair as if he were at a bar. His smirk cut through the air like a knife. Commander. Brick leaned back, his tone laced with mockery. We're here to learn combat response, not therapy. A few stifled chuckles rippled through the room, not loud enough to be noted, but just enough to tear the silence. Mara didn't turn her head. She only nodded, as if marking a simple truth. One man wasn't ready to learn. Lieutenant Hale, she called. Scenario 4, you lead. Hale sat still. Not feeling it, he replied curtly, his voice louder than the challenge itself. Some of us prefer real situations, not play acting. The air shifted. Eyes darted, tense as water before a storm. Brick raised an eyebrow and stood. Let me help her out, he said, striding toward the podium, his boots striking the floor like steady hammer blows. You want real? I'll show you a real response. Mara watched him as if observing an unwanted lab specimen. She didn't step back, didn't turn. The fluorescent light glinted in her eyes, cold and clear as a scope's lens. Brick stopped half a meter from her. All sound vanished. Then his hand swung up. The slap echoed through the room like a bullet cracking an echo chamber. A moment so brief no one could intervene. Mara's head didn't turn, she didn't blink. Only her collar shifted slightly, then settled back into place. The air froze, thick between men and women bearing silver insignias. She raised a hand, adjusted her collar, and spoke in a voice so calm it was chilling. You just failed a real test, Captain. No shouting. No threats. Just a cold verdict, delivered like a report. Then she turned. Class dismissed. No one moved. Every eye followed her back, stunned, confused, some fearful. The door closed behind her without a sound. The slap hung in the air, as if the room itself were trying to comprehend what had happened. Outside in the hallway, afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, glinting off the insignia on her shoulder. Mara didn't pause, didn't look at anyone. In her mind, a memory flashed a cold night in Coronado, when she was 24, soaked in mud and salt in her blood. A SEAL instructor screamed in her face, "You not reacting because you're scared?" She hadn't answered. He slapped her, no less hard than Brick. Then another instructor stepped forward and whispered, "You don't flinch at pain. You respond with purpose." Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. Those words, she never forgot. Today, they burned as true as a code in her blood. Behind the door, chaos stirred. A young lieutenant blurted, "Will she report it?" Brick scoffed, rubbing his hand as if he'd scored a point. "Report what?" "She won't dare. All talk, no fight." He tossed a stress ball between his hands, his gaze defiant. But rumors don't sleep. Within an hour, the barracks hallways buzzed with 3 versions of the same slap. One said she froze. Another, that she whispered something that made Brick back off. And another, that she was too shocked to speak. Each rumor was a pebble dropped in a pond, ripples spreading far. By afternoon, as the sun dipped over Coronado's shore, Commander Elias Rivas had heard it all. He leaned on the second-floor railing, looking down at the courtyard, watching Mara cross the training field, her stride as straight as a ruler. He didn't intervene. He knew her. They'd survived training courses together that others quit halfway. He only murmured to the duty officer beside him, "If she's not talking, she's preparing." That evening, the training office stayed lit. A technician entered, nervous. "Sir, Lieutenant Commander Consincade just booked a close-quarters reflex drill at 2100. It's not on the schedule." Rivas looked up. "Who's on the list?" "Captain Brick, Lieutenant Hale, and 2 other officers, sir." He nodded. "Good. Ensure the infrared system is running. No one interferes." Meanwhile, in the North Barracks, Mara stood before a mirror. The red mark on her cheek was nearly gone. A faint trace, not painful, just a reminder. She opened a drawer, pulled out an old seal patch, a worn black cloth, frayed at the edges. Not for nostalgia. To remember, every slap is a test of whether you've forgotten who you are. She set the patch down, opened her notebook, and wrote 3 words: "Restore reflex protocol." The drawer closed with a precise click, like a military clock. Outside, the intercom announced dinner, guard shifts, and patrol schedules, everything normal. But in the heart of the base, something else was moving. Silence was realigning itself. The San Diego Naval Base had its own way of spreading a story. Not through social media or emails, but through small harbor cafes, gym benches, or hallways where people pretended to wait for elevators. The slap in Tactics Room 4 had become public property. Each person added a detail, a whisper, until the story resembled an urban legend more than truth. They said Lieutenant Commander Mara Consincade spoke no word on her way to the admin wing, that she touched her collar, looked straight ahead, and walked through the thick air of stairs. A young sailor claimed she paused in the courtyard, as if hearing something only she could hear, then kept walking. In the officers' lounge, Captain Brick remained the center of attention. His voice boomed, a mix of smugness and defense. "She froze. I swear. No words. No reaction. Probably the first time someone told her no." Some laughed, but the laughter died quickly. No one voiced what everyone knew. The slap, by every regulation, was physical assault on a superior. But if the superior didn't report it, the system wouldn't move. And that made people uneasy. Why was she silent? In the barracks, silence was never just silence. It was a signal. Dusk fell fast over Coronado Bay. The sunset swept across the academy's glass, casting golden streaks like cuts in the air. On the second-floor balcony, Commander Elias Rivas leaned on the railing, watching the courtyard below. He saw Mara cross the training field, her posture unchanged, back straight. The sea breeze caught her jacket, revealing the frayed edge of an old insignia. Rivas had seen that walk in Djibouti, in a desert thick with the smell of burning oil, where she stayed calm as artillery exploded 20 meters away. He knew what was happening better than anyone. Mara wasn't walking away. She was shifting gears. "You'll want to see this." The technician's voice broke his thoughts, pulling him from memory. The tech held a tablet showing the internal training system log. The latest entry: Reflex Combat Room, 2100 hours. Requested by Lieutenant Semendau M. Consincade. Participants: Captain Brick, Lieutenant Hale, 2 observing officers. Rivas nodded slowly. Make sure the infrared system is live. No one touches the settings. And, he paused, lock the override from the coordination hub. No one accidentally shuts off the cameras tonight. The tech nodded and left quickly. Rivas stayed, eyes darkening. He knew this kind of unscheduled drill, not for revenge, but for recalibration. If Mara said she needed to reset protocol, someone was about to be taught from scratch. As twilight faded, the base changed shifts. Streetlights flicked on along the main path, reflecting off the calm sea. In the North Barracks, Ensign Fields, a young sailor once trained by Mara in psychological warfare, stood silently before her office door. She rarely praised, but always remembered every trainee's name. He took a deep breath and knocked. No answer. He was about to leave when the door cracked open. Mara stood there, uniform immaculate, face serene enough to make you forget anything had happened. No red mark, no trace of anger. "Commander, I just wanted to make sure you're okay." She looked at him, light as a breath. "I'm fine, Fields. Everything will return to order." The door closed. Fields stood there a moment longer, feeling as if he'd received an order without one being given. He walked away. One thought in his mind: this base is about to see something. In the officers' lounge, Brick was still laughing, retelling the story as if repetition made it truer. I swear she stood like a statue. Didn't even twitch. That's the kind who avoids conflict. He tossed the stress ball and fist-bumped Hale. At least, she made class less boring, Hale added. The others stayed quiet. Some avoided eye contact. In the background, the lounge TV flashed a training alert. Warning: Reflex Combat Facility in use tonight. Do not approach unless assigned. Hale glanced at it and chuckled. Probably prepping another PowerPoint. Brick shot back. If she dares show up, I'll show her what a real reflex looks like. None of them noticed that a copy of the facility usage log had already been sent to Commander Rivas's office, along with sensor records, access rights, and Mara's signed approval. Archer Dansenshofen. The close-quarters reflex facility sat at the base's southern edge, a signless concrete block cold and detached from the nearby airfield's hum. Inside, corridor lights shifted from white to red, like veins coming alive. Mara passed through security, swiping her card. The beep confirmed command-level access. She paused before a mirror in the prep room. Her reflection was unchanged. Steady eyes, square shoulders, hands still. On the table, her old seal patch lay neatly beside her training log. She placed her palm on it, whispering a phrase only she heard. Not retaliation. Restoration. When the clock struck 21, the system announced, Reflex Protocol online. On the observation tower, Commander Rivas donned his headset, his gaze stern. Below, red light flooded the training maze. No wind, no footsteps outside. Only silence, waiting to be directed. The locker bay near the reflex facility always carried an odd mix of smells: metal, sweat, and the chalky dust of gloves. Tonight, the air felt thicker, colder, as if the room itself knew what was coming. Overhead lights flickered in rhythm, casting beams onto the concrete floor where Lieutenant Commander Mara Consincade stood alone, hands resting on the edge of a sink. The light reflected off her face, so still it could be mistaken for prayer. Not for herself, but for order. The slap from earlier was now just a faint pink mark on her skin, a gauge. Not a wound. No anger, no pain. Just a signal that a boundary had been crossed, and she would realign it. She shed her outer jacket, hanging it neatly on a hook. Her black undershirt clung tightly, sleeves rolled up precisely one turn. Each movement was deliberate, like a ritual. On the bench nearby lay her old seal patch black cloth, frayed edges folded neatly beside her open training log. She sat, tapping her pen 3 times on the log's edge, a habit from Hell Week, to keep her mind sharp amid chaos. The pen moved, inscribing the first words, "Restore Reflex Protocol." Below, she noted the date, time, and 4 smaller words, "No audience required." A cold gust slipped through the door's crack, making her eyes close briefly. Memory flooded in the first night of Hell Week. She was 24, slight, soaked to the bone on Coronado's sand. Waves, whistles, and shouts blended into a giant heartbeat. An instructor, twice her size, face red, screamed in her face, "You not shaking, Consincade?" She didn't answer. The sudden slap burned across her face. Not painful for its force, but for its intent. They were testing her breaking point. She didn't break. Everything in her tightened into a single thread. Control. Another instructor stepped forward, voice hoarse from sea mist. "You don't flinch at pain, Consincade. You respond with purpose." That became her backbone. The next year, when shrapnel hit her in Djibouti, lying in a field medic tent, she repeated it to herself. Don't flinch. Respond with purpose. Now, in this room, it returned, clear as a countdown clock. Mara opened a second locker. Inside was a small black bag, its zipper scratched. She pulled it open. Tactical gloves, wrist wraps, and a velvet band around a silver trident seal. She held it, turning it in her hand. It wasn't just decoration, it was a map of who she'd been and why she was still here. She didn't need to prove strength. She needed to prove discipline still had teeth. She clenched her fist, set the trident on the table, and took a deep breath. Over the distant intercom, the night shift's exercise music looped slow, repetitive. Each beat was a reminder. 30 minutes to 21. Across the wall, a technician's boots tapped lightly. "System stable, Commander." "Thank you." "After 2100, no one enters," she said without turning. "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated, then added softly, "I heard about the training room. If it were me, You're not me," she cut in, gentle but firm. He fell silent, nodded, and retreated. The door closed, leaving Mara with only the hum of the ventilation. She bent down, unstrapped her watch, placed it neatly beside her log, and stood. Her posture straight, even, emotionless, was the product of thousands of training hours. Outside, the wind shifted. The metal door rattled faintly. Mara glanced at the mirror. In her reflection, her eyes weren't tired as they'd been that afternoon, but held a strange light, a mix of stillness and motion like the sea before a storm. No anger, she told herself. Only protocol. On the table, the seal patch caught the flickering light. She leaned down, marking one final line in her log. Objective. Recalibrate behavioral boundaries. She closed the book, the sound sharp and crisp. Everything around her was orderly. Jacket folded square, gloves aligned, patch set at a 45-degree angle. Not obsession, but method. When the world outside was chaos, order was the only weapon she trusted. The ceiling lights shifted from white to faint red, the system activating. She zipped on her gloves, the soft rasp like a knife slicing fabric. Every movement was controlled, no excess, no lack. She stepped to the door, peering through the small window. Beyond was a concrete hallway leading to the training maze. Not a soul in sight. But she knew. Upstairs, Rivas was watching via monitors, a gatekeeper for justice. Mara placed her hand on the doorknob, took a deep breath, and whispered not a prayer, not a vow, just a reminder. No one touches a seal without leaving a mark. The door opened. The red light swallowed her. Shijoden Lingwufen. The officers' mess at the San Diego Naval Academy buzzed as usual, but the air felt different today. The clink of cutlery on metal trays sounded sharper. Conversations softer. At the room's center, Captain Brick lounged at the head of a table, feet propped on an opposite chair, jacket flung open as if on leave. Beside him, Lieutenant Hale grinned, spearing a piece of chicken and nudging him. "I almost feel bad for her." Brick laughed, mouth full. "Bad? Today she learned rank doesn't save you from reality." The officers at the table forced smiles, but their eyes flicked away. One pretended to read a bulletin. "Reflex Combat Facility, closed for internal drill at 2100. Bold red text flashed. No one spoke, but all saw Concencade on the approval line. At the far corner, Petty Officer Lauren, a former Spec Ops turned trainer, looked up from his tray. He glanced at Brick's group, then the bulletin. A feeling like rising seawater stirred in his gut. He knew that woman had trained under her, and knew her silence was never surrender. Lauren stood, set his tray down, and slipped out quietly. The night hallway grew quiet, only the echo of boots remaining. Lauren headed straight to the command tower, knocking 3 times on Rivas's office door. "Come in," a low voice called. Rivas sat before a monitor, its glow reflecting in his eyes. Lauren stood at attention. "Sir, she's planning something. The base is buzzing." "I know," Rivas replied. "I signed off on that drill." Lauren froze. "You signed?" "She followed protocol. No one can call it retaliation. This is certified training." Rivas removed his glasses, setting them aside. "We'll monitor. The entire IR system will record. I want all data saved directly to backup, no edits, no filters." Lauren nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll arrange a medic." "No need." Rivas cut in. "But ensure witnesses are in the observation room. Tonight's a lesson for more than one." He turned back to the monitor. It displayed a maze simulation, 4 main corridors, 5 observation zones, and a central room labeled Zone B. Status: preparing. Arshuden Shurfen. The sky over Coronado Bay darkened to a leaden purple, the Pacific wind carrying salt. In the North Barracks, officers whispered. "Heard she requested Brick for the drill," one said softly. "No way. Who'd train with someone who slapped them?" another replied. But the rumors chained together, racing like voltage through a wire. Somehow, the whole base knew. Something off schedule was happening tonight. One joked, "Maybe she's setting up a real Red Room show." The table laughed, then fell silent as a guard's glance swept over. No one noticed that in the ground floor tech room, the internal alert system began displaying commands entered under Mara's access rights. Initialize sensor grid. Reflex protocol. Enable behavioral telemetry. Lock external override. Beside it, heart rate and thermal graphs blinked green. A young tech watched the data, shivering slightly. "Looks like she's prepping for a real op." Arshuden Shurfen. In the observation room, Rivas was ready. He wore a headset, mic on. On the table, a black coffee and a notebook, labeled Disciplinary Simulation 4A. Live. Beside him, 2 observing officers sat still, unsure what they were about to see. "Lights go red in 20 minutes, Rivas said quietly. "Then all sound below cuts out. She doesn't need noise to teach them." One officer asked softly, "Sir, what if they cross the line?" "Then they'll learn what the line is," Rivas replied, eyes fixed on the screen. Arshuden Shurfen. At the south hallway, Mara left the locker bay. Her black training uniform hugged her frame, wrists wrapped, hair tucked under a mesh cap. She carried nothing but a comms mic. Her steps were silent, her shadow stretching long on the concrete floor. She passed the waiting room, where 2 young officers prepped mock weapons for the drill. Both snapped to attention when they saw her. Mara nodded slightly. "No changes. Start on time." "Yes, Commander." She moved on. At the hallway's end, a metal door opened, revealing dim red light. She paused for a second, then stepped through. In the observation room, a signal light blinked. Rivas spoke into the comm. "Reflex protocol. Online." Screens lit up. Infrared feeds. 4 heat signatures moving in the maze. Brick, Hale, and 2 others. A 5th signature, still in the center, was Mara. Rivas said slowly. Discipline recalibrating. Arshi Den. All white lights in the reflex facility snapped off, replaced by a dim red glow like seeping blood. No sirens, no announcements, only silence, a heavy, gravitational silence. On the observation tower, Commander Rivas adjusted his headset, eyes locked on 5 infrared feeds, 5 heat signatures, 5 heartbeats, 5 breaths. 1 stood still at the center. 4 moved chaotic, uncoordinated, like animals unaware of their surroundings. Below, Mara Consincade opened her eyes. The maze's air was thick, smelling of fresh plywood, rubber, and paint. She heard every breath, every scuff of boots on the floor. The sensation was familiar, like the final test of Hell Week. She crouched, fingertips brushing the ground, feeling its faint dampness. The sensor system was active. Every move they made was recorded. A male voice echoed through the corridor. Where is she? Brick. Still arrogant. Still believing the game was his. Zone B. Corridor 1. Hale moved first. Mock rifle in hand. Eyes darting. Each corner had a reflective mirror. The walls were narrow, the red light casting faces in a uniform, fearful glow. Nothing here, he shouted. As the words left his mouth, the darkness behind him stirred. Something flashed past, too fast for the infrared to catch more than a blur. A second later, Hale was yanked backward, off balance. His arm was twisted, his center of gravity stolen. A dull thud echoed as he hit the floor, his rifle skidding away, eyes wide. A female voice came over the system. Lieutenant Hale neutralized. Response terminated. The tone was calm, devoid of smugness. On the tower, Rivas tilted his head. One observer blurted, God. She moves like a shadow. In the maze, Mara was already gone from her last position. Zone C. Central intersection. Brick advanced, breathing heavily. The red light stung his eyes, but pride kept him from slowing. Consincade, he yelled. If you want to fight, show your face. No response. Only the faint hiss of the air system. He took a few more steps, rifle aimed at nothing. Suddenly, boots scuffed behind him. He spun nothing. Hale, he called. Silence. A faint breeze brushed his left side. He jerked his head too late. A black shape slid from the corner, low, striking precisely at his weapon hand. The rifle flew free, clattering to the floor. In the same instant, her other hand twisted his outer elbow, pulling him forward, using his own momentum to drop his center of gravity. His body, nearly half again her weight, hit the floor faster than he could process. The impact echoed, heavy. On the tower, Rivas whispered, Force redirection textbook. Brick struggled to rise, breath ragged. Mara knelt beside him, her knee lightly on his back, just enough to pin, not break. What did you learn about reflexes, Captain? He groaned. You set me up. No, she said softly. You set yourself up. You forgot hands are weapons, not tools for humiliation. Her words carried through the system, echoing off every wall. The 2 observers on the tower sat frozen. One swallowed hard. Rivas said only, That's why she was sent here. Mara stood. Brick lay there, sweating, eyes dazed. She showed no satisfaction. She touched her mic. Scenario complete. Simulation terminated. The red lights still pulsed, but Rivas's voice broke through. Confirmed. All units hold position. Moments later, the white light snapped back on. Reality returned. Gray concrete, human breath, the smell of metal. Brick pushed himself up, looking around, realizing everything cameras, witnesses, Rivas was recording. No escape, Hale was being helped up in a corner corridor, still shaking his head in shock. The other two officers stood pale, motionless. Mara walked past them, eyes on no one. As she passed Brick, she paused half a second, her voice calm. Lesson 1, Captain. Reflexes don't start in the muscles. They start in restraint. Then she left the maze. No one dared speak. On the observation tower, Rivas removed his headset, leaning back. One observer exhaled, almost in awe. I've never seen anyone that calm. Rivas gave a faint smile, still watching the screens. That's not calm. That's discipline, the real kind. The final data flashed. All targets neutralized. No injuries. Protocol complete. And in that white-lit room, everyone knew the slap from that afternoon had been answered, not with a hand, but with a system. The next morning, the first sunlight spilled through the barbed wire, touching the bronze plaque reading Naval Leadership Institute, San Diego. The base looked peaceful, as if the red night never happened. But in the Eastern Admin building, the air was thick, heavy as before a surgery. The disciplinary hearing room was lined with gray carpet, a long oak table gleaming like a mirror. At its head sat Commander Elias Rivas, hands on a file marked internal, urgent. Beside him was Captain Ellen Monroe, the Navy's ethics judge, her face stern, silver-rimmed glasses glinting. Across from them, Lieutenant Commander Mara Consincade sat still. Her uniform was crisp, collar regulation perfect, no decorative insignia, only her name stitched small on her chest. The slap's mark was gone, and with it, any emotion. She carried no notebook, took no notes. She sat, hands lightly on the table, like someone awaiting an order she already knew. To the left, Captain Brick and Lieutenant Hale sat together. Their arrogance was long gone. Brick stared down, his wrist lightly bandaged where it had been pinned. Hale looked sleepless, eyes bloodshot. The two observers from the drill stood silently in the back row, serving as witnesses. No one spoke. The air conditioner's hum was the only sound, steady and cold. Rivas opened the hearing, his voice low, neutral. This behavioral review is convened under Article 147B, physical misconduct toward a superior officer. Evidence includes training logs, audio, and infrared footage from the reflex facility. He slid the file to Monroe. She opened it, flipping pages, each rustle sharp as a gavel's tap. Captain Brick, Monroe said, her voice cold and even, can you explain your actions? Brick swallowed. Ma'am, it was a moment of misjudgment. You thought the slap was part of a drill? Monroe cut in, not looking up. Per 30 witnesses, that class involved no physical simulation. Do you dispute this? No, ma'am. His voice was barely audible. Lieutenant Hale, Monroe turned. Did you engage in provocation, mockery, or encouragement of the act? Hale nodded, shoulders trembling. Yes, ma'am. But I didn't think provoking an officer during class was misconduct? No, ma'am. It was misconduct. The room's air thickened. Monroe closed the file, nodding to Rivas. Rivas turned to Mara. Commander Consincade, anything to add? Why didn't you file a report immediately? Mara replied, her voice so calm it seemed detached. Because the system doesn't need anger, sir. It needs facts. And time for people to reveal their true nature. Monroe studied her, her gaze unreadable. You initiated the drill? Yes, ma'am. Under my training module authority. All participants signed waivers, confirming readiness for the simulation. She opened a small folder, sliding it to Monroe registration forms, time logs, and Rivas's approved system confirmation. Every signature, every timestamp, perfectly aligned. No gaps. Monroe reviewed it, then said softly, almost to herself, you didn't respond with your hand. You responded with protocol. Rivas leaned back, scanning the table. Does anyone dispute the drill's lawful approval? No one spoke. The witnesses nodded confirmation. Monroe closed the file, setting her pen down. Her voice was sharp but not angry. "Captain Brick, your action constitutes physical assault on a superior, violating leadership standards, and damaging this facility's reputation. Effective immediately, you are suspended from training duties and will await administrative reassignment." Brick bowed his head. Sweat traced his temple. "No defense. Lieutenant Hale," Monroe continued. "You are formally reprimanded and removed from this quarter's workshop program." "Yes, ma'am." She paused, looking at Mara. Her voice slowed. "Commander Kincaid, your restraint and use of educational measures over personal response are noted. A formal commendation will be sent to the Ethics Command." Mara nodded slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." Rivas concluded, his voice low, steady as a drum. Hearing adjourned. Dismissed. No one stood immediately. The silence held them for a moment, as if the room needed to absorb the verdict's weight. Then chairs scraped. Footsteps sounded softly. Mara rose first. As she passed the table, sunlight from the window lit her face, not triumph, but the calm of someone who'd put everything back in place. Brick stared at the table, hands clenched, unable to look up. Hale sat frozen, as if wanting to melt into his chair. Behind, a younger observer, one who'd never trained with her, nodded as she passed. Not a formal salute, a soldier's acknowledgement. The door closed behind her with a soft click. No one said another word. The system had recalibrated. Dawn washed over the San Diego Naval Base, stretching light through iron fences and dew-glistening training fields. The intercom droned steadily, rhythmic as ever, but something had shifted the way people walked. Along the flagged courtyard path, polished boots no longer clacked loudly. Steps were firm, precise, quiet. No one ordered it. They just adjusted, as if the base itself had been reset. Lieutenant Commander Mara Kincaid appeared on the western path, her light uniform catching the sunlight. No combat insignia, no entourage. She walked alone, hands behind her back, eyes fixed on the runway ahead. The same walk, steady, even, unreadable. But people no longer watched with curiosity. They stood taller, shoulders squared, not from fear but respect. A young officer, new to her training, nodded as she passed. She returned a slight nod, barely noticeable, but enough for him to know. He understood. Farther off, Petty Officer Lauren, the one who'd tipped Rivas that night, hurried to catch up. He said nothing until he matched her stride. "Morning, Commander." "Morning, Lauren." He grinned, tilting his head. "Quiet today, huh?" "Even the officers are keeping it down." "Quiet's good," she replied. "As long as it comes from awareness, not fear." They walked a few more meters. Lauren said softly, half joking, "Guess everyone knows the first rule now." "What rule?" "Never touch a seal." Mara didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. Just enough for her breath to sound like a soft exhale. Sunlight glinted off her cheek, a thin streak of light. They paused at a fork leading to the admin building. Lauren saluted formally, then turned away. Mara continued straight, each step light as if walking on water. Inside, the personnel hallway was silent. Brass nameplates gleamed, ceiling lights casting golden reflections. On a bench by the wall, Captain Brick sat alone, uniform pristine, hands on a rough canvas bag. No cheap cologne, no banter. Just a man, back straight, eyes empty. As Mara passed, he dipped his head slightly. No apology, no explanation, just the instinct of someone who'd learned what his slap had truly struck. She paused half a second, looking at him, her gaze neither judging nor pitying. She said softly, almost a whisper, "Keep that silence, Captain. This time, use it right." Then she moved on. The admin door closed behind her, soundless. In the courtyard, the sun climbed higher. Rivas stood on the second-floor balcony, watching the base. He saw Lauren drilling new recruits, Brick still on the bench, and Mara fading toward the field's end, her silhouette blending into the sky like a fine line on a vast map. He didn't intervene. No need. She'd done what the system sometimes forgot, reminded it why it was built. Rivas exhaled, lifting his radio. Send the reflex protocol report to command. Note: no violations, no injuries, training efficacy 100%. Yes, sir. He switched off, still watching her. A faint smile forming the smile of someone who'd seen justice done without a gavel. Noon. In the training room, two young officers pinned a new note to the board. Rule 1. Discipline is not silence. Below, in smaller text, it's knowing exactly when to act and when you never have to. No one knew who wrote it. Some guessed Rivas, others Lauren, but a few in the class swore the handwriting matched Mara's. As wind blew through the window, the paper fluttered, rustling like a breath. Someone read it silently, like a vow. Late afternoon, Mara returned to her office. The day's final light spilled across the wall, stretching her shadow. She opened a drawer, lifted her old seal patch, and set it on the desk. Not to sew back on, not to polish, just to rest under the light. She took her pen, writing one last line in her log. Protocol complete, system corrected. She closed the book, set the pen aside. The office door shut, its hinge soft as a breath. The bass resumed its rhythm, but no one was the same. Some victories have no cheers, no medals, no speeches. Just a silent room and a system set back on track. Lieutenant Commander Mara Kincaid didn't need retaliation to prove herself. She reminded the world that discipline isn't fear, it's wisdom in the face of anger. The slap was no longer an insult, but the starting point for a lesson the entire base had to relearn. No one has the right to touch another just because they can. And when the light returned, it wasn't about revenge. It was about control, honor, and inner order. If you've ever stayed silent to protect something bigger than your ego, you already understand her. Share this story, so those who think silence is weakness, learn that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not react at all. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because in part 2, the test of command, Mara will face the one challenge that forces her to break the very rules she set.